you go off-grid in an English town or city? Well, that's a question I've been asking myself for many years, and it's one that really goes in different directions depending on how you define off-grid. Is it food sufficiency? Is it water? Is it services? What is it? For purposes here, I'd like to just concentrate on the most simple definition of off-grid, and one that I think anyone will relate to, which is coming off the electricity grid, because there's the most visible movement for off-gridishness happening in our towns and cities. Everyone's fitting solar panels, and in the countryside you see windmills and so on. And the technology is there. A lot of people are doing it. And I'm just going to share with you now my journey towards off-gridness, because I wanted to disconnect. Most of the systems that you see fitted to people's houses, they're grid connect, which means you can benefit from the solar when the sun's shining. If you've got a lot of it, you can dump it back into the grid. But when the solar isn't there, you can pull from the grid. So it's really a sort of a big backup power station for Britain PLC, quite a useful thing for people to do. But this doesn't suit my definition of off-grid. And what I wanted to do when I started messing around with these systems was disconnect from the grid. It just suits my idea of self-sufficiency. So I'll show you the system that I ended up building, and I'll kind of explain why I never managed to completely disconnect. I came up against what I would call the 10% rule, which is you can get the first 90% there done quite easily, but the last 10%, it keeps defeating me. But I'll explain what I've got. On my roof, I've got 12 PV panels, which I fitted myself. I started with 5. I found that wasn't enough, so I bought another 7, fitted them. And that gives me 5 kilowatts of grid power. That's several electric kettles, or 2 electric ovens, or 1 immersion heater plus a kettle or something like that. It's quite a lot of power. I mean, your house will spike up to 5, maybe even go over 5 for short periods, but on average, that's plenty of juice. But of course, you only get that when the sun is shining in midsummer, full on the panels, which is why you always oversize these things. Anyway, I've got 5. I fitted it, and I went for what they call a hybrid inverter. I mentioned most people just top up the grid. Hybrids are quite good because you can program them. You can say, I want to be off grid, or I want to be on grid, or a combination of the two. You can set them up with timers and so on, say pull from the grid at night time and charge my batteries and interesting things like that. But I went for one for the very fact that I could control it and make it would do what I wanted it to do. And I also bought some batteries. I started off with 5 kilowatt hour battery pack. Found that wasn't enough, so I bumped it up to 10. And that sees me through more or less a 24-hour period, because we consume between 5 and 9 kilowatt hours of electricity in the average day. So the 10 kilowatt hours will see us through 24 hours, by which time the sun's coming up again, because strange enough, the solar is on the 24-hour cycle. So that's how I sized it. I partially sized it as well by what I could afford, because although it would have been nice to go for 20, 30 kilowatt hours of storage and have 2 or 3 days of battery power, the price doesn't justify it. I always try and make these systems pay for themselves. And you find you only use your extra batteries 1 day in 5 when you've had a run of days when the sun wasn't out or something like that. And the rest of the time they're just sitting there looking expensive, which isn't great. So I went for 24 hours worth of battery power, 5 kilowatts being as much as my house would ever reasonably spike up to. And I filled my roof. There was no more room for any panels, so there was another limit on my system. And I plugged it all in. And it was great because I had free power. The system came online with its full 5 kilowatt capacity in May a couple of years ago. And I just sat there enjoying free electricity. It was great. Until we got to about the beginning of December. And then I noticed that my neighbour's tree, so it was a couple of gardens away, which wasn't particularly tall either. As the sun started to sink lower, this damn thing, it was a pine tree as well, so it didn't even drop its leaves in the winter. It started encroaching on my solar panels. So it got to the point that by the time we were near the winter solstice, this thing was tracking across my solar set from sunrise up until about midday. Which, as anyone who knows about solar panels will tell you, shade one part of it, you might as well shade the lot. So come the end of the year, I was only charging for a few hours a day, and the sun's setting by 4 o'clock in December anyway. Add into that the fact that we often have cloudy days in Britain, and my wonderful system really wasn't of much use in December. I've got some figures here which we can have a look at, because the inverter outputs quite a lot of stats. Okay, here's the output from the inverter. There's quite a lot of stuff on the screen actually. It's rather useful. Even tells you what the weather is. Anyway, the thing we're interested in is this graph at the bottom. You can break this down by the day, by the month, by the year, and forever if that's what you want to look at. Let's look at the day. Today, as you can see, is the 1st of January 2026. It's been quite a sunny day. The green shows that I'm producing power, and it's spiking up to 2.7 kilowatts there. The corresponding line that goes down when the green goes up, that's the charge going to the battery. So it basically shows I was charging the battery. The pink to the right shows that we started to draw from the batteries. Yellow spikes at the beginning of the day show we were pulling from the grid. That's all good fun, but I prefer to look at the monthly breakdown. And if I just flip it back to today, okay, month of January, it's the 1st, there's only one day to look at. We don't really export, so I'm just going to knock out everything except PV and load. Okay, and here's what we were looking at in the form of two single bars. The PV is the amount that we generated. As you can see, that was 4 kilowatt hours, and the load 3 kilowatt hours. That's so far. There'll be more load as we go into the evening. But we've pretty well covered our electricity use for the day, and that's good. But that was a sunny day. Let's look at the previous month. Okay, this was December. Now we've had a fairly rotten Christmas. It's been grey and quite miserable. Again, if I knock out the bits of the graph that just aren't useful. Okay, so we've got these two figures now from the 16th of December, the middle of the month, down to the 31st. 31st, that was yesterday. Again, that was quite a sunny day. We almost covered the load. 5.3 kilowatt hours of PV power as against 5.7 load. So we drew the balance there from the small amount. But let's go back a few more days when it really was quite miserable. The 28th, 1 kilowatt hour of PV power and 5.6. So we really well might as well have not bothered having a system that day. And of course, if you look at the preceding days, none of these were in a position where we had more PV than load. So the batteries, since the beginning of this period, have been flat. They never got charged up enough to carry through to the following day. So for all this period, we've been pulling from the grid. The worst day of all, let's have a look. What was the worst day? The 23rd, 1 kilowatt of PV power, and we had the family staying 14.2 kilowatt hours of electricity used. So that is a system about as big as you can comfortably get on your roof. I mean, I've not got a giant house, but every inch of roof is covered in panels. And here it is totally useless. If we go back to earlier in the month, again, this is earlier in the period, earlier in the year. Actually, sorry, we've gone back to the beginning of November. Sorry, to the end. We've gone back to the end of November here. Again, you see this same story at the end of the month from about the 26th, when I think the weather was fairly bad. Load spiking right up above PV power. Prior to then, it's up and down in both directions, but we can kind of cover a day's spike from the batteries. So middle of November was when things really started to turn bad. Go back to the previous month, knock those out again. And we've got it covered. And there's some days here where we're generating much more than we're consuming. That's charging the batteries in those days. So we're great. Look at the year in total. It gives another angle on this. Again, I'll knock out the surplus stuff here. So here we go, January at the left-hand side, down to December at the right. Beginning with January, 116 kilowatt hours of PV produced as against 169.7 of load. So we didn't really cover our consumption then, but we got sort of 3/4 of the way there. By February we're good, and by the time March comes along, we're right through the summer. We're producing a comfortable surplus. You notice anyone that would be expecting it to spike higher than this in the peak summer months of June and July. I would just point out that we don't export. Because I fitted the system myself, we don't have an export license. So that's why that's sort of capped. But what I want to just point out here is, as long as the green is longer than the pink, we're supplying all our power in that period. So from the middle of November, December, and into a part of January, we can't cover our load with any combination of solar panels that you could fit on a house or batteries that you could reasonably afford. And that's about as good as you can get with PV. It was quite disappointing because I was so pleased with the system, and it's wonderful to see it all sitting there on your roof and you think, free power. Could I go off grid with this? Well, I've looked at it because one of the smart things about the inverter is it will actually it'll boot up a generator set. So providing you get a smart generator, you can connect it to the inverter, and when the batteries get down to a certain point, it'll automatically start the generator. And you set it saying, okay, don't start the generator at night time or something like that. So it can be quite clever like that. And of course, this is the setup that people have in the countryside. Your Jenny fires up as and when is needed in the winter time. I didn't go down the route of fitting on here. We're quite built up where I live, and I didn't want to run the risk of annoying the neighbours, complaints to the council, that sort of thing, with the investment that you would need to spend on a generator. I could have just been throwing it away. So I didn't go down that route. Now, the thing I did spend some time looking at is the power system that's an obvious and easy complement to solar, which is wind. The great thing about wind in a country like Britain is that the power curve, the annual curve of wind production, peaks in the winter. It's the opposite of solar, which is at its lowest output in the winter time. So in theory, you get a little wind turbine, and in the winter months when your solar is really declining, and the thing will be whizzing around, and these setups do work. Wind and solar is a known combination. Unfortunately, if you live in a town, you'll come up against the problem of turbulence. Because the townscape is so up and down, the airflow within the sort of first 50 metres or so of ground level, it gets very disrupted. And everything I've read says you've got to be well above this turbulent layer, which means your turbine's got to be quite a long way above the tallest buildings around you. And our little garden is quite low down. Got neighbours that are higher. We're a single-storey house, two-storey houses, so the buildings are higher. On either side, there's trees as well, which are mature oak trees. And the idea of getting my turbine tower higher than the nearest obstructions, and it's quite a distance, this turbulence effect, was just not going to work. It would be an insane tower. It would be visible from one side of Truro city to the other. So I reluctantly decided not to go for wind. The only type of wind turbine that I understand you can use close to ground level in a town is the vertical axis turbine. But unfortunately, the commercial models, certainly on a small scale, don't seem to be available. You get little cheap toys basically, but I haven't seen anything in the vertical axis turbine department that I would want to spend my money on and fit. Which is a shame. It is a shame. If the townscape was slightly different, if I was on the top of Rocker Flats, or if I was on the top of a hill and the rest of the urban environment was lower than me, I could certainly go for wind. But my circumstances have prevented that, and that might be the same for a lot of people living in towns and cities. This turbulence effect of the urban environment may well defeat you. So am I off grid? No, I'm not. Something might turn up. There might be another tech comes along, maybe a quieter generator set or a better built vertical axis turbine. When I find one, I'll fit it, then I'll be off grid.